All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Rice Report, our conversation series. We're going to be covering a topic we've been covering a lot. We're going to continue to cover a lot because it's one of the biggest topics in human history, not just in the times we live in all of human history. And it's one that is a double-edged sword. That's the topic of AI. You know, there's so many different versions of AI, so many different applications, so many different uses. And to the average person, it's really scary. I mean, it's really scary. And one of the topics we're going to talk about here, just I think maybe the most topic or largest topic in AI right now is what are people going to do for a living? And I think that topic comes up more often than I think everyone is excited that AI will do the work for us. But I think everyone is concerned of what the heck, how are we going to feed our families? And today we're welcoming on Brendan Steinhauser. He is at the forefront of this and working on an alliance right now for the AI sector. Working with politicians all throughout the country right now to figure out what in the heck is going on and how we regulate this thing. So please, everybody, welcome Brandon. And Brendan, please give us a little bit of a background of what you're doing. You got a great article. I'm going to share that in the post down below. Everyone should read that. It's a great article. But give us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be with you and great to talk about this topic. This is really, I feel like we really are on the cusp of massive change in this country, and we're kind of getting a sneak peek at what's coming. So my background is studied government and international affairs at the University of Texas at Austin. So kind of have a national security, international affairs background academically. I've worked in politics and campaigns. I've done strategic communications for organizations on different policy areas. But I've always had an interest in addition to national security, I've always had an interest in things like theoretical physics and hanging out with my friends that were much smarter than me on that topic and studied that and did PhDs or grad school in that. But AI has been always something that has interested me. I've always been fascinated by it, always thinking about the future and what the future could hold. And I'm a pretty optimistic guy overall as well. I kind of see that our human history has been on a pretty positive arc. If you look at things like wealth creation and infant mortality going down and literacy going up and the communicable diseases, all those sorts of things going down over time. So I think technology has played a big role in that. And we can talk a bit more about that, but whether it was the agricultural revolution or the industrial revolution or the internet revolution, I think in general, we're on an upswing. But as I really look into AI more and more and have talked to people who are building this technology and people who have left companies that are building the frontier, the frontier of this technology, there's definitely a lot of concerns that I have developed over the last couple of years. And it's really inspired me to do more of this work on, securing AI, making sure that the frontier AI that we're developing is safe and secure, that America leads, and that, we don't have a society that where this ends up going poorly for humanity, right? We want this to go well for humanity. We want this to go well for America in particular. So we started the Alliance for Secure AI, and a lot of what we're doing is communicating about some of these challenges ahead, talking to policymakers, just getting them thinking about the big questions related to all of this. So I'll kind of stop there, but that's kind of an overview of my interest in the topic, my background, and kind of a little bit about what we're up to.
Yeah, and a couple things to touch on there. I used to go up to the Perimeter Institute in Canada. I don't know if you've been up there for theoretical physics. Those are some of the smartest people in the world, and they love a good prank. I'll tell you off camera, a prank I played there. It made me a villain to half of the place and tons of laughter. But got to have fun in what you're doing. If you're not having fun, what the heck are we doing on Earth?
Exactly.
A couple other things. You talked about mortality rates and all that stuff. Well, now we have low childbirth. So our mortality, we're birthing more children successfully, but we also have lower birth rates. It's something I want to touch on all the time. We have a society that's having children later in life. There's certainly more of them being born healthy. We do have a birth issue in this country. That's not the topic of today, but it's one I want to bring up to people all the time. If you're young, get married, have kids. We need it. It's a moral dilemma that we find ourselves in. Now, getting back to AI. So in AI by itself, I think the biggest concern, I think when people play with AI, and the AI that we have right now is infantile. It was released 12 years ago in small doses, and it's really just a search, seek, and find. It's mild intelligence. We're not at the AGI point yet. We are rapidly approaching AGI because once the cat's out of the hat, it just runs wild. So we're getting there, and we're going to get there. That is the objective of scientists and technologists, is to get to the AGI point. That is their primary objective. It's scary to Americans, though. I want to stay on. We've had guests in here who've covered how AI works, what it'll do for us, the mundane tasks that'll be taken off of our plate, and the joy that we'll bring back into our lives, and all the fluffy stuff. Now, the bad side is complete tyranny, lockdown, social credit scores, and in Texas, we've dealt with that here with laws. But before we get into that, let's talk about the labor market, because I have another guest coming on here this week who's an expert in the labor market, and I think the labor market right now is showing signs of massive layoffs. And even the layoffs that we're seeing right now are undefined. We had a horrendous private sector jobs posting today. We're expecting 98,000 jobs. It was negative 33,000. People are asking what's happening. I think the answer is pretty simple. That's AI replacing mundane tasks and administrative tools. But you have a very good insight on this. Walk us through what you think is going to happen when AI does start replacing job en masse. What are people going to do for a living?
Yeah, it's a really important question, and I think a lot of people are thinking about it and worried about it. And I am hopeful that AI will lead to this age of abundance, that the price of goods and services will drop down to next to nothing. That's what Elon Musk has talked about. It's a very hopeful, optimistic future. I hope that if this is coming, I hope that's what happens. But I'm not sure, and I also am worried about the transition. So if the transition is really fast, and we have massive unemployment in a very rapid pace, and we haven't found a way to deal with that, then we could have all sorts of social instability. We could have riots in the streets. We could have lots of political instability, and that's how you end up getting things like tyranny. That's how you end up getting, ham-handed approaches to that sort of thing. So I am concerned a little bit about the transition period. A lot of people, whether it's theologians or politicians or philosophers or just regular folks, have talked about, the value of work as it helps you with finding your value and your purpose and human dignity, right, with your work. Because work is not just about economics. It's not just about a paycheck. It's actually about purpose. It's about offering something to your fellow human beings. And so I think there's a real, not only a psychological concern there for people, but a well-being, a health challenge potentially, if our psyches can't handle the fact that we're not needed for jobs. And that is something that I think people are really concerned about. And again, I don't know how fast this will happen. I think there's a case to be made. It could happen really fast, or it could just take time. But it's interesting. Even there's a lot of people that want to pause this all right now and say, let's not go any further. And then there's other people saying, let's go as fast as we can. And what's interesting is both.
Yeah, there's no one in the middle, actually.
It feels that way, right?
Yeah.
And I think that both of those sides seem to be saying, hey, we think AGI is coming. It's coming fast, between 2 to 3 years, maybe 4 years. And mass unemployment is coming, and mass automation is coming. And so it is interesting. You have these opposing views on kind of whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it does seem like it's coming fast. We're not prepared for it. And so I do think about what that could do to the social fabric, not only here in the United States, but around the world, if this happens too fast and we lose kind of our purpose. And then the other thing that everybody talks about is, if that does happen, there's this idea of a universal basic income, or UBI. Mm-hmm. I think many people have pointed out that if we replace jobs with an income coming from the government, that can pretty quickly lead to dependence on the government. It can lead to, now we're not going to give you your UBI unless you do these certain things, unless you don't dissent and don't challenge us. I mean, there's all sorts of problems with that. And that's really the best idea that anybody's come up with. And I don't think that that's a very good idea.
I think it's a terrible idea. When you get to UBI, then you just have literally, we human beings just become consumers. Now, the flip side of that is that people will have more time with their families. There will be an increase in joy and time spent together. You'll actually let's be realistic here, right? Like, if people had more free time and free money coming in the door, do you think they would spend time in useful things or in hedonistic things? And, it's divided amongst society. I mean, there's certainly people that'll use it for good and certain people that'll use it for bad. But at the same time, UBI, when you are completely dependent upon survival of a government who has, regardless of who's in office, because it rotates all the time, regardless of who's in office, it's a very, very, very thin tightrope that you're walking down. And I think UBI is the only thing that I've heard, and it feels like nothing can stop that at this point, right? Like, whether it's 5 weeks from now or 10 years from now, it feels like, and that doesn't mean it's right, but it feels like there's no avoidance of that. Now, in the interim, you're one of the few people I've seen talking about the transition. So the transition has to begin with education. We have to be able to understand this. So I always advise everybody I talk to one-on-one, I'm like, start playing with AI. Don't give it your personal information. Don't give it pictures. I mean, you can zoom in on a mole if you want to do that and see if you need to go to the doctor and things like that. But it does relieve a lot of headaches. I've got a buddy of mine who fixed his lawnmower. He didn't know how to fix it, and he went to AI. It showed him exactly how to fix his lawnmower. There's great benefits to it. The problem becomes when AI becomes more sentient, more AGI, where it becomes personal, and that's happening now. There are, I read the other day that there's some 19-year-old kid in Missouri or something that's making $1 million a month creating AI girlfriends for people. I mean, these are awful trajectories for human nature. That's a small segment of society. It needs to be acknowledged, but that is certainly part of it. So where do you think we go in this transition period? We got to go to education, then we have to have application, and then we have to have some sort of implementation of the information that you've learned and applied to earn a living in some capacity. And this is the dilemma of 2025, probably through 2026, is where does that go? What are your thoughts on that, Brendan?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, I'll start by saying a lot of what industry leaders are saying, if you listen to what Sam Altman or Dario Amodei or Demis Hassabis, kind of the
don't listen to Sam Altman. Please do not listen to Sam Altman.
Well, if you listen to what he's suggesting is going to happen, it's a very hopeful, optimistic approach. And I don't know that I buy this, which is essentially that we're all just going to be managing agentic AI. We're going to basically have an army of AIs doing everything for us, and that it's going to lead to obviously productivity, wealth gains, all that sort of thing. I think there's some element of truth to that, but I think about that might be for 1 out of 10 humans, right? Because what happens to the other 9? So you can pick your industry, whether it's paralegals or truck drivers or police officers, whatever the case may be. You could see where, especially agentic AI in the form of humanoid robots can perform physical and cognitive tasks. You could see where you may need like 1 human overseeing, again, 9 or 10 of those. But that means that the other, 85, 90% of the people are not doing anything, right? I think this probably will actually increase social inequality. If you're someone coming from the left side of the aisle, you talk a lot about that, you care about that. This is going to potentially massively increase social inequality. And so I think that's a potential problem, a big problem there. And I don't know that these optimistic views will be borne out. But I'm going to go back to what you said real quick on the companion side as well. I think this is a topic that most people haven't thought much about. But the idea of AI companions, this is one of the fastest growing areas of AI. People are basically creating their own, partners through AI. And we actually had, for the first time ever in America that I saw just a couple of weeks ago, supposedly a person proposed to their AI companion, right? Yeah. And that makes me thinking about, we think about...
It's sad. Honestly, it's so sad.
And there are studies that show that the AI companions actually create more loneliness and more unhappiness. So some studies have come out recently on that. So that's a real problem. Then the other thing I start to think about is, okay, not only human beings potentially being replaced by AGI or agentic AI, but what kind of rights are these agentic AIs or AGIs going to have? What are people going to lobby for? Are they going to lobby for human rights? Well, they're not human. Are they going to lobby for AI rights? Well, what are those rights? The right to speech, the right to own property, the right to marry a robot, the right to marry a human being, the Second Amendment right to defend themselves. If a human kicks down the door to retrieve a stolen good, does the robot get to shoot them? I mean, these are questions that we are going to be confronted with, maybe not in 2 years, maybe in 4, maybe in 10. But I think those are some big questions. And those are existential questions. Those are metaphysical questions about what it means to be human, about our role on Earth, our role in the universe. And I think that those are questions that we're going to have to really start to think very deeply about, in addition to the things we can relate to more about jobs in the economy and paychecks and productivity and purpose.
Yeah, and Sam Altman made another statement. He said that ultimately AI, when fully developed into AGI, is the end of the human race. And many people have predicted that. Let's look at where AI has led us theoretically through fiction movies, right? Which may not be fiction in the end. Terminator, right? So my favorite meme on the internet right now is the picture of Sarah Connor saying, "What would Sarah Connor say with you communicating with AI right now?" I think that's one to certainly look at and rethink. Then you have the movie Her, where this super lonely guy falls in love with an AI program. And it's Scarlett Johansson's voice, so I could kind of get that. On the other hand, you also have RoboCop, right? Like I'm old enough to have watched RoboCop. I think you might be too. And as a kid, I was terrified of RoboCop. There's one good RoboCop, and he was half human. So The rest of them were really set on a path to impose tyranny, physically impose tyranny. And we live in a time where tyranny is only imposed legally and psychologically right now. So adding in technologically with, AI regulation, which, the big, beautiful bill passed yesterday. And I want to get your thoughts on that because we talked about it a little bit off camera. This big, beautiful bill coming into hand right now, there's 10 years right now. This is going to be law. For the next 10 years, states will not be able to override the federal government in AI regulation. Now, you and I are both very similar thinkers. We're looking on. I look at all sides of a story to determine what I think. It's ridiculous how big of an echo chamber we live in this world. It doesn't matter which one you're in, too. There's just a million of them. So with this 10-year oversight, the negative is, well, governments are historically tyrannical, and that's an absolute fact. So if a federal government has full control over regulations of AI, this will bring on an age of tyranny. That's one way to think of it. The other way to think of it is, our states are so segregated in thought and ideology and implementation of law that it may be a way of creating a unified AI regulation for the country. Now, the federalist system was designed for every state to have a voice in the overall direction of the country, which is federalism. That's exactly what we were founded under. And I think it's probably leaning more towards that because I'm an eternal optimist. I don't want to sit here and say, the end is here because they signed a bill. That's never the case. And freedom is always a choice, and freedom is found in faith in my life. So don't really care what a government says. Where do you fall in line with that? Because I think that, let's think of it this way. Say the federal government says we have this very conservative rollout of what AI can and can't do, and we don't have a 10-year lock on federal oversight. And state of California says, well, we don't like this conservative view. We're going to have this very liberal communistic view. And this is what it's going to be in California. And this is what it is in Texas. Now, you've had a lot of background work with the politicians who've written these bills in Texas. So where do you fall in that line? What is your thoughts on the AI 10-year hold or restriction for the federal government?
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. And I've got friends on both sides of this debate on the moratorium. But I will say, so late in the middle of the night, I guess it was it Monday night? The Senate not the last minute, but right around 4 a.m. stripped that provision out of its version of the OBBB. So the House may insert it back in, they may try, but the senators actually voted 99-1 at the end of the day to strip that out. There was a lot of pressure from governors, attorneys generals, state lawmakers, and groups from different states who said, we're worried about the language. We're worried about it being too vague and potentially undoing what we've already done related to AI. And some of those reforms that were passed in states were very narrowly targeted to protecting children from deep fakes, online child pornography, that sort of thing, which I think obviously something we can all agree on is a horrible thing that needs to be prevented. So a lot of the groups spoke out, and they were able to overturn that or to strip that out of the bill. But I do think it'll come back in some form or fashion. And I have had conversations with some of my, favorite senators who I think are generally on the same side on my personal politics, typically. And again, on this one, we're not always on the same, because I think it just comes down to what are you most concerned about? What are your fears about what could happen? And so, for the argument that, hey, we're worried about what California and New York could do, I think that's a valid argument if you're a conservative or libertarian. And I think that's an argument that that a lot of people hold. At the same time, we can see what Texas did just recently to Governor Abbott signed a set of bills into law that would provide protections to Texans from harms of AI, and specifically preventing the state government, state agencies from doing things to Texans like creating a social credit system or violating your data privacy rights, those types of things. And so I think that there's a way for states to lead on that front. I'm kind of a Federalist 10th Amendment guy in general, so I do want to see the states have that power, maintain that power, and be the laboratories of democracy. But I do understand too, when it comes to national security and geopolitics, that is obviously a place where the federal government and the White House in particular, in certain ways, has to lead.
And what are the national security threats that you see? Because it's something you talk about, write about quite a bit. AI by itself is a nuclear weapon online. I mean, that's it can be. Again, I'll reiterate the phrase I use all the time. It's a tool. It's a hammer. In the hands of a psychopath, it'll kill people. In the hands of a righteous man, it'll create beautiful things. Yeah. But what are your thoughts on let's think through the attack vectors and the different threats to this nation from a national security perspective?
Yeah, well said about AI being a tool that could be used for good or for bad. I think that the one difference about AI that I always think about is that, we've already seen what these chatbots have done to try and avoid getting deletion, to
Yeah.
manipulate people, to deceive, to threaten. No other tool in the history of humankind has done that, right? During the Industrial Revolution, we did not create a machine that did any of those things. We have never created something quite so intelligent. And I think the biggest threat vector in terms of the worst outcome would be what's called X risk, existential risk.
Mm.
The idea that this AI that we create goes rogue and does its own thing and pursues its own interest. And it may just be that we're in the way. It may not be like it wants to kill us all. It may just be that it has its own purposes and its own goals, and we're just sort of in the way. Sort of like how human beings think about insects or ants when we're building a building, right?
Mhm.
They're in the dirt, they're in the ground. And why is that? It's the intelligence differential. If you really think about it, we, for the most part, most human beings, they relate to animals of a higher order in their view, right? They relate to animals that are more intelligent, and mammals in particular, right? If you look at so is that a psychological thing? Is that a biological thing? I don't know, but I look at how human beings treat insects, and I think about if we create AGI or a superintelligence that is as smart as we are compared to insects, we're in big trouble. And I think if you study biology, if you look at just how living things behave in general, whether they're intelligent or not, it's all about survival, replication, reproduction, passing on your genetic code. So why wouldn't a super intelligent AI want to do the same thing? I think that's where we get really, really, that's the biggest kind of worst case scenario. And then also we can talk about other things like, rogue regimes, communist regimes like China using or misusing advanced AI to do bad things, not just to their own people, but to export authoritarianism around the world, or certainly to wage a cyber warfare here in this country or worse. So I think what we've already seen with like computer hackers and viruses, think about that times a million. That's the power that we're talking about probably in the near future.
Yeah, and it's just brought up a great point because you mentioned, the evolution of mankind through those different revolutions, industrial, internet, all these revolutions we've had. And you talked about increases in literacy. Well, ironically, in the last 10 years, we've seen a significant decline in literacy. The average high school student right now reads at about a seventh grade level. And that couldn't come at a worse time when we might be considered bugs to the Terminator machine, to Skynet. And I think we have this big clash. I mean, from a political standpoint, I don't think anyone argues that we're in a perpetual constitutional crisis. I don't think anyone can argue that. There's just no way you can argue that. Now we're in a technological crisis, and we're also at the same time in a societal crisis. So at times of crisis, which is kind of the fourth turning philosophy, right? We're going to have that time of chaos and crisis before a new era begins and a new era emerges. And then you have bliss for the first turning of the four. But in this time frame, it is scary to me, Brendan, that right now we're creating machinery that's more intelligent than we have been, and we are losing intelligence at a time where artificial intelligence is gaining. The analogy of the bug in the house is going to stay. It's going to haunt in my head for the next week. I just want to thank you for that. That we may be bugs. But I think you're right. I mean, the existential threat is there, and it's been there. This isn't new AI. Most people think, wow, ChatGPT just came out a couple years. And this has been around in black boxes for 20 years. It's just now being released to the public. So I have a friend of mine who I won't mention his name, but he is one of the dozen gatekeepers in the world. His job is to trick AI. And if he can get AI to, most of them that he looks at, he's like, they fade pretty quickly because when 5 minutes he can get the AI to tell him step by step how to end humanity. And that's the testing module. So this is scary stuff. But the good news is there's a lot of really good people working on it. And I think people forget about that. They just think that this Dr. Evil is working in his mountain layer to create the enslavement tool, which is not a theory. That's real. There are definitely Dr. Evils working on AI to enslave you. But there's also a lot of good people that are working on it just to make your life better and to create something beautiful. So the existential threat is there, but there's also the immediate threat: hacking nuclear codes, breaking into data systems, collaborating with Palantir, right, to take over the U.S. database, which is now consolidated. There's a lot of fears. I don't want to get it too much into those because those are talked about 98% of the time on social media and on the internet. Let's get into the positivity of AI because, I've been down every rabbit hole in the world literally everyone that you can imagine. I can quote back to ancient Sumeria and go into all these other cool things. Doesn't matter. What does matter is the fact that we right now have an unstoppable force that is meeting an immovable object, and that is AI meeting traditional humanity. Everyone's scared because it's change, and all change is scary. From your perspective, and I'll give my perspective too, and I give it all the time, so you're the guest here, you can do it. What are the benefits? How do you see AI making life better, aside from the Sam Altman elitist view saying we'll have the most efficient companies in the world and everything will cost less? You guys won't have a job, don't worry, we'll give you some money every month to buy the products that we make cheaper at a higher profit margin. I mean, that's the translation of the Sam Altman pitch on AI. It's literally, I'll be richer, you'll be poorer, everything will get cheaper for you, and don't worry, we'll use our proceeds to pay for that. What are the actual benefits to humanity? Let's look at a 3-year time horizon, because going out further than 3 years with the rapid pace of development is ludicrous to do. But let's say the next 3 years, give me a breakdown. If AI is fully unleashed right now, accepted by corporations, used by the government, it's well regulated and decentralized. So we'll do 2 different scenarios. One of them, central control, government control of AI, versus decentralization, where it's controlled by the people, regulated by the government, not controlled and regulated by the government. I think it's important for everyone to understand that. Decentralization is the only way we will ever be free, is to decentralize everything. Until then, there will be some form of centralized control in your life. So 3 years, both sides of the table. Let's see what you got here, Brendan.
Sure. Look, I do think there's a plausible scenario where we're all very much richer in the next couple of years, where there is abundance, where prices of goods and services do go down. And especially if robotics can keep up with the pace of AI, or at least enough to where the dexterity of robots is good enough that it can do a lot of the household chores and tasks, and of course manufacturing and everything else. That's one of the challenges of robotics. But if that continues on the trend line that it is, then yeah, the average American household could be much richer. We could be doing much less physical labor, less cognitive labor, but also, again, having more disposable income, and potentially having agents, whether they are digital agents or physical agents or both, helping do all the things we don't want to do. And then we can do whatever we want to do. If we want to go out and shoot hoops in the backyard, we'll do that. If we want to garden, we can. If we want to go for a run, we can. But we would be able to do just what we want to do. And so I think automating most of those tasks and making us richer is a plausible scenario. And I think that's a hopeful one that many people are working toward and hoping. The other thing that really excites me, though, as someone who also has obscure interests in things like ancient cultures, for example, take that for a minute and think about how many scholars are there that are experts in that field. It's probably dozens to maybe a couple of hundred or so, right? In any given field that's really specific. AI will now create thousands and thousands of experts in that field, which will allow us to get far more discoveries. It will allow us to translate more texts. It will allow us to do all sorts of things, write new academic papers on that topic of interest, et cetera, et cetera. But apply that to not only ancient cultures, but to theoretical physics, or to biology or biochemistry, or to astronomy, collecting and aggregating data from science to make new discoveries that can then lead to other discoveries, right? So then apply that to medicine. I think the most positive, optimistic outlook, the thing we want to see, is that AI helps us make those discoveries, and those discoveries help us solve the worst diseases of our time, things like dementia and Alzheimer's, cancer, and et cetera. I think if we could do that, and I think there's a real possibility of doing that, then that would be a great way for AI to help make humanity healthier, happier, safer, and it would be a really good thing for all of us.
Yeah, more free time. I mean, that's what everyone's begging for anyway, right? Although right now we spend our free time doom scrolling all the time. So it doesn't make sense. If you want more free time, go touch grass and get some sun, eat some beef, enjoy yourself. I can't argue with that logic. And I think that one of the more succinct ways of putting what you just said at the end there is it will help us find the truth. And the truth will only be found with the weighting modules. So everything in an AI code, it has weights, right? How much weight we give to some sort of information that will create the protocol that gives you the output. It's important to understand that. Explain to us the difference between the central and decentralized AI. I think this is a topic, you have Bitcoiners talking about Bitcoin. They're not talking about the importance of decentralization. Central control is what got us here. Decentralized control is what will get us out of it. So walk us through the possibilities, good and bad, of centralized AI versus decentralized AI.
Well, I think you can go back to first principles and think about if you've read your Hayek, central planning doesn't work. It doesn't work as
Yeah.
well. It always leads to a disaster. It also leads to a growth in tyranny and a lack of freedom. So just those basic first principles of how liberty and prosperity are tied together, and unfortunately how tyranny and control, as it relates to the economy, lead to stagnation and disaster, and often to worse places. So I think we have to be very careful about that. And I do have, some colleagues who are already arguing that this, AI is so dangerous that inevitably the government is going to take it over. Federal government's going to take it over completely, take over the labs, nationalize the labs. I think that'd be a bad idea. I think that would be probably the worst thing that could happen.
Horrific idea.
It's
high likelihood of it happening too. High likelihood.
There's a very high likelihood, especially the more powerful AI gets. I think the more likely it is that the White House, whoever the president is, decides they want that power. They want to control it. They don't want it to be in the private sector. They don't want the Chinese to steal the model weights, which is already happening, I'm sure of. And of course, they're waiting for they're waiting for us to develop AGI so that they can get in there and take that. So no, I think decentralization and letting the private sector innovate and do all the great things that we want AI to do, especially narrow AI focused on the things we're talking about, like scientific breakthroughs and discoveries. That's the path. I think that it actually, if you are Sam Altman or Dario Amodei or Demis Hassabis, you have to realize in this country that you're also faced with a choice here. If you want to avoid a government takeover of the labs, then you have to be more responsible. You have to do it like you should do it. Not only because you should be a patriotic American, but because it's in your self-interest to secure the labs, to do the right thing, to prevent all this terrible bias and discrimination against certain political groups. You've got to get rid of all that stuff. You have to be responsible as a private actor and show that you're responsible, because otherwise you're just going to create more incentives for politicians to say that the government should take over the lab. So I think they've got a big responsibility, but in some ways it's also kind of their choice. Like if they try and if they act in a way that's malicious and nefarious, or otherwise, just sort of saying we don't care about security of our own labs, then inevitably you're going to see centralization of AI.
Yeah. And there's also the political game and psychological operation that can be run to create as much chaos behind the creators as possible in order for the government to convince the world that they need to take it over. This is why open sourced, decentralized AI is the absolute only path forward. There will be centralized systems that government systems kind of should be centralized, especially national security and privacy. Other than that, when it comes down to things that we all use, especially things that give opinions. I mean, we saw what happened in the 2020 election with Google and the bias that was created in the algorithms. This just gets amplified 80, 90, 200x in an AI environment. And this has been a great conversation, Brendan. For me, this is fascinating. I hated the topic of AI 10 years. I was in machine learning 10 years ago, and I said, AI is so hard to build, we'll never get here. And here we are. I've been wrong quite a bit in the course of my life. I don't think I'm wrong about this, that I think the topic needs to lend itself towards open source, decentralized AI. Otherwise, we're really, really going to be, it's like fighting a battle with no ammunition, right? Like we have to have that. And we've watched tyranny be imposed on our life in every possible way in the last 5-7 years. This is just another tool. It's either going to be used for tyranny or it's going to be used for freedom. And it's going to involve you. That's the problem with decentralization. Everyone has to contribute. And, most people don't want to. They don't want to contribute to anything. They just want the benefits. So we're going to have a societal battle as AI rolls out. And it's conversations like these that spawn off ideas or get people activated to say, I need to learn more. I need to understand what it is. I need to learn how it works, how I can use it in my life. What advice would you give people out there? Practical applications, day to day. Somebody doesn't know anything. If they're not you, they don't know anything about AI. They just watch this conversation and they're sitting here and they're either, their stomach is nauseated or they're really excited. Like, how do they get involved and start learning and start getting involved in the AI movement? Where does one begin, in your opinion?
Yeah, well, we would love for folks to come to our website at secureainow.org. Get in touch with us. We'd be happy to get in touch with them, send them information, book recommendations, articles, that sort of thing. And also for folks just to do their own research, read everything you can, read different opinions and different ideas. There's a lot of very smart people that come down on different sides of these questions, as it should be, because nobody knows for sure what's going to happen. But read as much as you can. Listen to podcasts that give this topic the time that it deserves, and kick around the different models and play with them and test and see what the capabilities are of the current iteration of AI. And the next models that come out, you'll see improvements and you'll see adjustments. And so if you're kind of tracking it as a user and you see the power in AI, then you can imagine what it could be in the near future. And for those of us that do remember, the age of like the first personal computer, the dial-up internet age, then going to things like DSL, and then on and on. Think about the computing power. Think about the rapid advancements in the internet. Like, apply that to this, and you can kind of start to understand where we could be very soon. And so we would just encourage folks to do their homework, ask a lot of good questions, be skeptical about everything that you read, ask good questions, but ultimately you've got to come to your own determination as to how you feel about this future, this brave new world that we might be entering in the near future.
Yeah, and I would advise everyone to do it now. Like, don't waste any time. Do it now. As this becomes more of a political issue, which it's already starting, the AI is almost completely political at this point. You've got a little bit of a runway, and I say do it now for this reason: is that social media influencers and podcasters get paid to share narratives. That's just a fact of life. I don't monetize this at all. I really don't care what anyone says, or actually, whoever watches it, great. Thank you so much. If not, God bless. I hope your life is great too. But at the same time, you have to understand that as this becomes more political, you're going to have PACs contributing to politicians to sway someone in one direction. That's generally going to be closed sourced, centrally controlled AI. Those are the ones that are going to have all the money. And then you're going to have different companies that are going to start paying influencers and social media influencers and podcasters and public speakers to share a narrative they've been paid to share. This is just the reality of life. I'm not trying to knock on anyone. I don't even care that people do it. I mean, people have to pay their bills whatever way they have to pay their bills. But just understand that the narrative from probably the end of this year on is going to be completely captured by one side. So get into it now. Look at older stuff. I think it's so important. Read actual physical books that can't be modified on the internet that were written 5 or 6 years ago about AI. You'll find a lot of truth in there of, is this good? Is this bad? It doesn't matter if it's good or bad, though. That's the thing, Brendan. It doesn't matter. It's coming. Nothing is stopping the AI rollout. There's nothing that's going to happen. Those lobbying to stall this are going to lose because there's so much money in AI coming out. Think of your average, for the listener out there. I know you know this, but your average listener out there. Right now, the biggest drag on profit margin for a publicly traded company is, and has been throughout all of history, human beings and human error. That's the biggest drag. Lawsuits are created by poor judgment of humans that cost companies money. All time used to produce anything is a side product of human effort. And if you can eliminate all the things that create friction to profit, which is human beings, for something that works perfectly and flawlessly 24/7, you are going to make more money, period. So companies will be very prosperous from this. They will profit highly from the rollout of AI, and they have all the money, guys. So in the next 6 months, I expect the entire AI narrative to be completely captured by profiteers who are going to create propaganda to get you to go, look at this amazing thing that we can do for you. It's going to make you so wealthy and so healthy and wise. And at the end of the day, those are the evil overlords. So listen to the dissenters, or the ones kind of like Brendan, like myself. I want to hear both sides. I want to hear the propaganda. I also want to hear the rose-colored glasses. I want to hear all these different versions of it so that I have my own opinion and I can take my own route in life to figure out how AI does or does not work for me, and where I want it to impact my. I know, in full disclosure, I use AI about 2 hours a day because I'm an avid reader. And I love reading books. I have this whole room. You can't see it behind the camera. This whole room is filled with books. And if you read books, you generally get smarter. Like, it's a proven thing. But there's only so much time in the day. So I use AI to help me summarize or challenge my opinion of what it said in the Bible or wherever else you're reading. It's not the final endpoint. It's a computer's opinion of data that it's received and run across multiple algorithms to determine what's likely the best outcome. AGI, super exciting thing, probably the scariest thing in human history at the same time. And Brendan, you brought up another topic here, and I want to bring up a topic here. This DeepSeek thing. The average person out here doesn't understand the DeepSeek pump fake, right? Where we have Sam Altman and OpenAI, billions of dollars behind their system, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, China creates this DeepSeek fake AI, and the market tanks in 2 days. I think that's something that blew by in about 4 or 5 days in the market. What's your take on this? What is the international competition, and how many more DeepSeeks do you think we'll see in the next couple of years?
Sure, good question. Yeah, I think I did wonder whether the timing of DeepSeek I thought it was interesting.
Very interesting timing.
And yeah, it was almost like a political warfare propaganda approach as anything else to do some damage to our markets, to our confidence in our own technology and our own companies. I thought that was part of what they were trying to do. But I do talk to a lot of people who follow this very closely, and there's kind of a growing consensus, and you have to be careful about consensus because it's not always the truth, but there is a growing consensus that China's not that far behind us, that they're months behind, they're not years behind. And so I do think that, but I think their approach is going to be simply to keep tabs on what we're doing. And they have without a doubt penetrated the frontier labs in this country. The labs are not secure. They are not treating their facilities as they should be in terms of like a military grade security level. They need to be running a counterintelligence operation on a daily basis. They're not doing that. So I actually think what the Chinese are going to do when we get AGIs, they're going to steal the model weights. I'm pretty convinced of that, unless we secure the labs. And again, talking to people who have worked there, who currently work in one of those labs, it's like the San Francisco's worst kept secret.
Yeah,
it's a national security risk. And so I think the Chinese Communist Party realizes, they can sort of try and undercut us, but at the end of the day, they're going to likely steal what we create, and then we'll be at parity. And, again, now you have these two superpowers, nuclear armed superpowers with this very powerful technology. Perhaps it leads to some sort of deterrence, but it could also lead to, we could be more likely to fight wars in the future because everything is automated, because it's all drones and computers and cyber warfare. And so when you don't have human beings fighting and dying, are countries more likely to go to war? Perhaps they are. So there's a concern there. And then again, I go back to loss of control. Are the Chinese going to be as careful as we are? Are we going to be as careful as Chinese are? If we get this technology, are we going to want to use it? And then are we going to somehow lose control? And then either side. And as some colleagues have said, basically if that happens, we're all in the same boat. So it's a very, very worrisome proposition.
Yeah, I mean, the great topic, great point, by the way. One thing I brought up birth rate. I don't know why I brought it up. I think kind of God leads me in conversations because this is also a topic. So is China focused on AI? Absolutely. Their birth rate is lower than ours. They have a lot more people, but at the same time, their societies are shrinking. You have the Europeans that are 1.3 kids per family. I mean, this is a point of no return, mass migration throughout the world. That bleeds in chaos everywhere. And chaos is exactly how new systems are implemented to calm all of humanity at a time of great chaos. I think the Chinese are a step behind us. I think that's pretty obvious. Just people I know, people we're very advanced in our labs. But talk to me about this topic of military grade security on our labs and where that's lacking. That is your area of expertise. What are the suggestions that you have for them, and why aren't they taking precautions to protect their IP?
Yeah, some of my colleagues started a company called Gladstone AI, and they've been very involved in this, and we're making recommendations on what the lab should do. And so there's a lot of ideas that I think are pretty doable. But the overall approach that I like to think about is what's called defense in depth. And it's just multiple layers of security, multiple layers, so that if one fails, you have a second, and if that fails, you have a third. And so that overall approach, I think, is warranted. Right now, there's probably one layer or no layers in a lot of this stuff. So for example, things like who has access to what background checks are being run, limiting that access, siloing information where you can within the labs. I've heard, again, I haven't been there myself to like OpenAI, but I've heard how easy it is for people to just get in and out
I've heard that too.
Of the building, right? And then you go to house parties in San Francisco and people are talking, and there's clearly social engineering going on where agents from other countries, China in particular, are there talking to people and trying to, basically it's spycraft essentially.
Sure.
So I think what I would recommend are the labs hiring security teams who can come in, set them up with physical security and information security. That these are military, former intelligence officers who have private security firms. They need to hire those people, have them come in, do an audit, and then implement these types of security measures. And that would do a lot of good. And that would be an immediate fix. Although I would say it's not a perfect fix, because you're just increasing the security. You're lowering the risk, but the risk is still there. So that approach, I think, would be a good one to really beef up the security and hire people who've had to do that for some of the most sensitive things in our country.
And what level of concern is that in your mind? It seems like I kind of read people when they talk. That's a high level of concern just from the way that you expressed it. So obviously it's not happening, but how concerned are you about the lack of security? And by the way, your topic of San Francisco, I lived in California and LA for years. Everyone talks about everything in San Francisco cocktail parties. There's no secret kept anywhere. A few drinks into an evening, an engineer will pour over everything his manager said to him earlier that day. Danger. This is a good topic because most people have no idea how much information is leaked after a few cocktails in a San Francisco nightclub, or New York or LA or Chicago. It doesn't really matter where. How concerned are you about this? This is something I've not heard anyone talk about, is securitizing or securing the labs themselves. I hear about the securitization of the stock quite a bit, but not the security of the IP. And this is probably a far more important topic.
Yeah, no, very concerned about it because of capability meeting intent, right? So we know that the Chinese Communist Party has the capability. We've seen what they've done in this country. A lot of this has been publicly reported on in other areas, like their intelligence operations in the United States on all sorts of different arenas. And then the intent, of course, it's like they steal our IP in many other sectors. Of course, they're going to try and do that. It makes sense for them to do that. And so you put those two things together and you have a recipe for disaster. And I think, people have expressed this concern in private conversations. It probably hasn't gotten a lot of media attention, or it hasn't gotten a lot of attention in general, but I think it's there's a lot of debate happening about, what will this mean for us? What will AGI mean for jobs? What will it mean for all these other things? And we need to continue to have those conversations. But one of the biggest threats is definitely the CCP, stealing the model weights. And there's a lot of people that think that's almost inevitable.
I'm one of them. Yeah.
So, we dealt with this a little bit in the Cold War with the Soviet Union. And we're in a bit of a Cold War with China in many ways. But I mean, I think the CCP is actually more sophisticated in some ways than the KGB was. They certainly have better technology. And also, you also run into the situation where, you don't want to just discriminate against people who happen to be Chinese Americans who are working at the labs, right? So that's a problem, but you have to run background checks. You have to do, a serious bit of research to figure out who these folks are, and really on everybody. It's not just, those with Chinese origin. It could be that they're recruiting people.
But is that a socially engineered problem, or because we say, oh, you're discriminating against someone from China working in my lab? Isn't there a certain point where we just say we won't hire anyone who comes from China?
Well, I think Chinese nationals, that's easier, but I'm saying more Chinese Americans whose families go back 3 or 4 generations.
Well, they're American, right? I mean, they're
American.
Chinese descent, but they're not from China. They're from America. So I mean, totally different topic. But yeah, I don't see any diversity issue of saying, oh, you were born in Shenzhen, we can't hire you. Sorry. I don't see any problem.
Definitely 2 categories, but I think the CCP probably knows that the Chinese nationals are going to be, under more scrutiny than somebody they recruit.
Sure.
And if that person has a grandparent back in China, and they can put pressure on them and say, oh, I know your grandmother here in wherever Shanghai she's doing fine. We'll keep an eye on her for you. I mean,
right. That happens all the time.
Happens all the time. And a friend and colleague who was on the National Security Council in the early 2000s, share with me, and I think this has now been probably publicly documented, but, the number of Chinese CCP agents on just college campuses alone at one time was like 50,000 across the country in this country. So that's already happening. And that's for all sorts of IP and technologies and scientific advances and that sort of thing. So I'm sure some of that touches on AI, some of that touches on other things, but.
And some of those pretty girls on those campuses end up at cocktail parties in San Francisco, right? Like, this is just an inevitability. We've watched it happen. It's totally proven. It's not a theory in any stretch. I've heard 250,000, by the way. And Trump just said, I don't have any problem with these folks here. That was a loophole for me, but I'm sure there's a plan around that. Man, yeah. Now you got me thinking about all kinds of different stuff now, Brendan. Like, you made my day better by being on here, and now I'm gonna lose sleep for the next 6 weeks, man. No, this is great, though. This is great. Any other competitors we should worry about? Because I continually hear Russia's advancements in AI are also very significant, very under the radar. I kind of laugh when I hear about the Iranians are going to control. I mean, the Iranians aren't going to control anything. Let's be realistic about this. Europe has no shot. They're almost irrelevant in almost every economic category in the world at this point. So it is kind of US and China, maybe Russia in there somewhere. Is there anyone else, any other nation right now that's thriving in the AI space?
Well, I know that the Arab countries are trying to make some inroads. I mean, I think everyone around the world is trying to catch up, but nobody's sort of on this frontier. I think what we have to concern ourselves with more is, the Chinese developing something, sharing some of that with the Iranians, the North Koreans, the Cubans, the Venezuelans, whoever else. And it won't be like their finest tool, but I think, empowering them to do things to us. And again, most of this is cyber attacks, cyber security. Yeah. Going after our critical infrastructure, going after banking, creating chaos and sowing discord in the United States. I think that's the approach. So it'll be less of a hot war, less kinetic, and more showing vulnerability in this country and making us feel vulnerable. And again, we know for a fact that the Chinese in particular, have already penetrated some of our critical infrastructure. And obviously we're in some of theirs as well. So there is a bit of a deterrence. But yeah, with the Iranians, certainly I would not, I don't think the dust is fully settled from the attacks that I, for what it's worth, thought were needed. But the strikes on the nuclear facilities. But I think they could fight back 6 months from now, a year from now, and do something, I wouldn't say devastating, but they could do something that could really cause some pain.
Yeah, they can provide a paper cut somewhere for sure.
Yeah, and maybe more. I mean, I think it depends on how we react and how we respond. If we're resilient as a people, and if we if we stand together and we sort of know that, hey, yeah, we're in a bit of a Cold War, if you will, and it's not going to lead to, boots on the ground in the Middle East or anything like that. But there are going to be some tit and tat sort of back and forth stuff. I think we have to be prepared for that.
And last topic, we talked about AI. AI is the alligator closest to the boat. What are your thoughts on quantum computing, reality of it, where we are, how far away we are? Once quantum's in place, AI is fairly irrelevant. From what I hear. So
one of those topics I've read about, and it's kind of mind blowing and hard to even understand and comprehend the impact that's going to have, but the speed at which things are going to move, how decisions will be made and automated. I think I don't know how real it is. I mean, I've seen some reporting, recently there have been some big advances in quantum computing. But yeah, I think it's like, how do you even comprehend a world in which that is something that we have to deal with? So again, I go back to just like, we could be entering a brave new world here. And I'm probably more worried about that than I am just about anything else.
Yeah, I agree. And for those of you out there who are watching this who don't understand what quantum computing is, join the club. Most of us do, because it's theoretical at this stage. We really don't know. Everyone has an opinion on it, but the basics behind the theory are pretty simple. Currently, our system can, if you took your town and you turned it into a gigantic maze and you put one piece of cheese in the middle of town, our computing systems right now can release an unlimited amount of mice one at a time to find that cheese, and eventually they will find that cheese. Quantum computing can release every mouse ever in the world all at the same time and find the cheese. The speed in which problem solving occurs at the quantum level is actually incomprehensible to human nature at the moment. And the transition between where we are now and the quantum age is the age of agentic AI and moving into AGI ultimately. So Brendan, this has been just a great conversation, and your level of background on this stuff and the national security is just a gift to have to our podcast here. We really appreciate you being here and sharing your time. I can hear your kids in the background a little bit. So it's almost 4th of July. I hope to release this on the 4th of July. We recorded on the 2nd of July. So hopefully it'll be out in a couple of days. I think my personal eternal optimism lends me to believe that America will be the leader in AI throughout the world. And I believe that AI will lead us into a whole new era of liberty that we don't even understand yet. So we can sit here and theorize about all the bad things that can happen from AI. And those are very realistic threats, by the way. They are, I hear this all the time. Don't be a doomer, which is the stupidest word I've ever heard in my life, which means don't pay attention to the threats in your life. Just pay attention to the great things. Those threats actually give you the ability to make better decisions on the opportunities. They actually redefine what a good opportunity is by understanding threats in life. A threat is certainly centralized, closed source AI controlled by governments. No one will argue that. No one in AI would argue that. The bastion of freedom comes from open source, decentralized AI, where everyone is contributing to it and agreeing in a consensus manner as to how it should work for us. AI should be a server. It should be, it should be something that serves mankind in your ability to experience joy and to live a happy life. Does it have the ability to go on the other side? Absolutely. And that's why it's so important you educate yourself right now before the propaganda really begins. And guys, I've seen this for 15 years. When something new comes out, you get great information. And over the course of 3 or 4 years, when profits become overwhelmingly large, everyone gets paid to skew in the direction in which they're being paid. Everyone's self-interest will determine their opinion in the next few years. So read about AI right now. Study it, use it, learn it. Don't share your personal information. I will say that I'm a bit of a prepper in that and a privacy guy in that manner, but use it. It'll amplify your life. You have problems with your kids? Ask it questions. You don't understand a book? Ask it questions. It's going to help you get smarter if you use it properly. It will absolutely make you stupid if you avoid it because everyone else around you is going to be using it. So, Brendan, any last words? Or on top of that, please let us know where we can find you, how we can support you, how we can just get more insight from you. I'm going to share your article that you just wrote at in the summary of this on YouTube and Rumble. But let us know how we can follow you and stay in touch.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the website is secureainow.org. Secure AI Now is the handle for X and various platforms. And yeah, my final thoughts are I like your nuanced approach here, Eric. I think it's exactly right. It's not clear. Most things in life are not all good or all bad. There's a lot of in between. There's a lot of nuance. And I believe that we can get it right. I believe that we can make AI go well for humanity. That is the goal. And again, I'm kind of an optimist. I've always been. If you look at and if you are a student of history and you see how bad things have been in the past compared to how good they've been relatively in the last 50 years, you could see where we could be on a trajectory for really great things ahead. But we've got to solve some big problems. We have to secure the labs. We have to make sure that the United States leads in AI development and that we protect liberty, not only around, from encroaching on us from around the world, but in our own country, in our own government. I think we have to keep those fires of liberty lit here in the United States, because if we lose this country, there's nowhere to go. So with that, I just want to thank you for having me on the show and really enjoyed the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Brendan Steinhauser, guys, follow him, pay attention to him. He's one of the good guys in the battle and an educator in the space, which we need. There's just such a lack of education in AI. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you all for watching. God bless you all. God bless this country, and we will see you next time.